Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news. Today is Friday, September 15th. I feel like I really have dropped the ball this week. Not really accomplished too much, it feels like. Had some non-YouTube stuff I spent most of yesterday to do working on. And around that, I've mostly just been trying to update like the OBS streaming to Twitch setup, and think I'll get that working eventually, but I'm waiting for an update in the advanced scene switcher as a plugin. And then I started working on this idea. This is something I've been talking about for over a year probably at this point, of using SteamDB's trending charts to make a graphic using Google Sheets and its ability to publish charts, Excel sheets effectively into charts. To get it to work, basically I'm making a macro that is submitting data from the website of SteamDB every time we would get a sample date. And then this is just some test data here, but here. So there's a sample date here, sample date here, sample date here. It would go to SteamDB, get that information. It would submit it via a forum, and the forum responses would go to Google Sheets. Then the forum responses get converted into a middleman sheet, second sheet, to just clean up the data a little bit. And then it gets converted into a pivot table. Which I think maybe you don't really need to convert it into a pivot table, but the pivot table certainly made it finally work. And once it's converted into a pivot table, which I really couldn't even explain to you what a pivot table is, then I converted it into a line chart. And this is really all I wanted here, is a logarithmic scale here of how many people were playing a game on that day, and comparing probably needs to come down to like the top 25. Like, I don't think there's really going to be enough room for like the top 100, but to get every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as I'm running my macro to bring up video game news, to get this to grab another sample point and say in the past couple of days people have been playing a little bit more Counter-Strike Global Offensive, a little less Dota, a little bit more Apex Legends. I think that would give me a very good understanding of where the real gamers are, which is the thing that you just don't ever get a good bit of information from. You have certainly a bunch of mainstream video game journalists and a bunch of people who are YouTubers who are not mainstream video game journalists, which I guess I'm in that category. And then you have a ton of advertisement and a ton of hype, but none of that directly equates or even linearly equates all the time to what people are actually playing. The vast majority of people, including bots, you can't really discount how many of these may be bots, but the vast majority of people are on Steam playing Counter-Strike Global Offensive and Dota and Apex Legends and PUBG, things like that. And week to week, day to day, those numbers don't really change that much, to the point where there might be an argument to ignore even the top 10 of games, because the top 10 of games are not going to change. And weirdly, SteamDB also includes the Source Software Development Kit base as its own game, when it really shouldn't be included. But over the course of a year, I'd like to be able to say, well, Naraka Blade Point was very popular when it came out, but then its fan base kind of valleyed out and hasn't been growing. Wallpaper Engine, for instance, here would be an example of something that might peak when it first launches, but almost certainly would be replaced. FIFA 2023 is probably eventually going to be replaced with a FIFA 2024. But yeah, so I'm working on this chart. I did have a thought that maybe I could try and pull the review percentages, particularly if I could just pull the number of positive reviews overall instead of trying to get a percentage. Either way works fairly well, but if I was to get a percentage as far as how many positive reviews there are versus how many negative reviews are for a game, I would almost need the percentage to go into a very small fraction, and that will only happen when you have something that gets reviewed quite a bit. So it's much more relevant, I would imagine, to compare a game that has 30 positive reviews and 0 negative reviews to a game that has 30 positive reviews and 15 negative reviews. Like, the one with 15 negative reviews has just been reviewed more, and thus that game is more important overall to know. In the long run, something like Counter-Strike Go, CSGO, might have 10,000, 100,000 positive reviews, and it would just constantly have that 10,000 positive reviews, and there's just no way for you to ever catch up and compare to that. So I almost would have to make my own calculations if I can get any of that data, but that would be definitely in the potential future as I'm working on charts to see if I could grab one more piece of information and see if we can find that useful. Honestly though, I'm not sure if it's actually that helpful to know what gamers, the real gamers, are reviewing, because even the reviewers of video games are still a very small niche group of people. Very few people review games on Steam. It's too difficult. You can't just do a 5-star rating. It's kind of crazy, honestly, that Steam doesn't pop up a review box after you exit an app. It would make a lot of sense if it did. It certainly could do that after it like detects that you get an achievement for beating the game. It could even go crazier, and Steam could almost certainly detect if you have been fairly idle for a long time, as if you were watching credits and not pushing buttons on a controller or a mouse or keyboard. 10-20 minutes of idleness in a game either means you're AFK or it means you're watching credits. So yeah, that is another thing certainly too that a better API could implement, that by default in the game itself you could trigger, as you're programming your own personal game, you could trigger a pop-up that says, hey, do you want to review this game? Now that you've gotten past a tutorial, hey, do you want to review this game? Now that you've beaten the first mission, do you want to review this game? Now that you've beaten the whole game. It could get very annoying very fast, and obviously you would want the player to be able to say no and don't ever ask again for any games or just this game. But that's weirdly not even something in the mobile phone range of like Google Play apps. All of that is, all those pop-ups are done by individual different APIs instead of Google directly. Other companies made those pop-up apps to give a game 5 stars. There really isn't even a 5-star system in Steam, and there should be. Okay, well, let's see. Let's go ahead and just hop in the shop. I was supposed to let's go ahead and open this special ticket. I was supposed to play some more off stream, more often than not, that never happens. The intention is somewhat there. It's not like I'm intentionally just lying about it, but the willingness to actually get back into something instead of working on something else, which I need to get back to playing the Blob. It's been too long. But yeah, I should have played more of this. I guess we have until the 24th, and we were making a lot of progress here, so it would make a lot of sense to do this monster type event all the way to the end as fast as possible by putting a little extra effort into it, and then get back to playing ranked to see if maybe I could get up higher than platinum, or at least get to platinum and reduce any potential stress as far as having to struggle at the end of the month, which it is 15th of the month. So I talked about in the last stream that apparently there was some controversy around DeviantArt, and I had not heard anything around it as far as them doing an investigation and banning accounts. And I kind of by default assumed, since DeviantArt is half artistic photography that allows artistic nudes and half drawn from just the imagination. If anything, it's probably not half artistic photography. It's mostly drawn from imagination art, a lot of which is adult oriented and have nudes in it. And so I thought, and I don't know why I picked that it was a case where they were shutting down accounts where it would have been artistic photography, where a underage kid might have been, I don't know, nude, like on a beach or something, and like on a nudist beach or something like that. But apparently it was drawings, which now that I think about it, makes a lot more sense. And yeah, there is this constant fight that the freedom of expression and the freedom of art is losing around the world, as far as even in the idea of a victimless crime in which you're just drawing a picture of Lisa Simpson naked. There's a push, and there's interpretations of laws that are pushing for that to be illegal too, regardless of the fact that it's fairly prevalent, or at least it was, that Lisa Simpson fan art was being, Rule 34 fan art was being made. But yeah, I think it has been consistent for DeviantArt that they've never really allowed for any kind of Lisa Simpson's naked type art. Rule 34 underage cartoons. So that would explain why they said the rules really haven't changed any. And it just leads to a lot of nonsense where you have 1,000-year-old vampires that look like they're 14-year-old, or you have 14-year-old animated characters that swear up and down that they're all characters in this portrayal are 18 years or older. And it really is very much, without getting into a huge rant, a slippery slope argument, because if society can be convinced to censor on the disgusting speech, as it would be defined, then they'll just push for more and more. Eventually they'll push for something like the little girl in To Kill a Mockingbird being being censored out, and To Kill a Mockingbird in general being censored and not available in the United States in general. It's already been pushed to be banned in many instances in public libraries and school libraries. Or maybe a better example is the novel with Lolita, which is written specifically from an unreliable narrator perspective to show that the narrator is evil. He even says so himself. It's kind of a cautionary tale, but that kind of story would not be able to be told. And it's a push of censorship from a lot of different directions. Inside the United States, it's conservative people and liberal people for different reasons, often pushing for censorship. Around the world, you'll have censorship of different styles pushed by, say, the Middle East, and by trying to implement UN rules and guidelines, or just pushing the general idea. There's a lot of Japanophobia that happens, so the anime moe styles are in manga. These are often pushed to be censored. So yeah, even like China will push to censor things that are maybe coming a little bit more out of the animation industry of Japan, which is one of their successful industries. Whereas a free speech advocate will almost certainly, if you're pushing towards actual free speech, you would say that it's pretty easy, without getting tied into the weeds of the actual content of anything, to say if something is just coming out of the mind of somebody, it shouldn't be made censored, made illegal. Maybe regulated, I could see. That's not 100% free speech, but there is definitely an argument that for content to be appropriate to the audience, that I could see being made. And if you go in any way away from that general concept, a free speech advocate is going to point out to you that at a certain point, if there are no if it's just coming out of the imagination of somebody, you're punishing somebody for thought crimes, effectively, for having wrong think, or expressing wrong think, which expressing wrong think and having wrong think is basically the exact same thing. If you can't express your thoughts, you might as well. You're inherently being punished. That's thus the idea of freedom of expression. Now, victimless crimes, certainly, when drawing Lisa Simpson naked, for an example, do require certain things that have never really been brought up to a court case, in that the person being accused has to have actually just thought it up from their mind. They need to not trace or be inspired by an identifiable minor, or a photo of the face of a minor or something like that. Is probably going a little too far for most people's taste. Photo or the minor in the presence of the person. Like at that point, when there is an actual minor, or even the appearance of a minor, likeness of a minor, the privacy of a minor being involved, then it starts to go into potentially there being a victim, even if you just gave it the same name of somebody who's real and recognizable. And then it would also have to be somebody real and recognizable who also has a high level of privacy because, yeah, if you, say, gave it the same name of somebody who is dead, or like Cleopatra, she was like 14 or something when she became queen, or say one of the like younger celebrities characters, at a certain point a parody might still be in the clear. But all these court cases always happen where somebody has real offensive material, adult material, including the images of real victims of children victims, and then they also have some cartoon stuff. And so then, because of the dirty hands of that aspect of that, there's the jury is just totally willing to convict on all counts. And particularly in those kinds of cases, it is all counts, where they'll just count every single frame of, say, an animated GIF or movie as its own image, and you'll have like 40,000 charges against one of those persons, and the jury will just be overwhelmed by the number of charges, and they won't bother to debate any of it, and they'll just say guilty on all counts. There have been some court cases towards in the other direction, but it has been fairly untested in the court system and fairly back and forth. And those court cases are effectively what eventually, to get back to video games, determines how Valve and their lawyers explain or their own, how they justify their own actions more than even determine their own actions based on how the court cases have gone in the past. But yeah, I guess I wanted to clarify that point, even though it's not video game related. It's probably not the only thing that I shot my mouth off on in the past few days, as far as making bad takes over headlines. But allow me to make another bad take. We have had a major amount of stories here of people being super mad at Unity, and we still have a ton of it right now still going on. Here's a GameDeveloper.com article saying mobile publishers threaten to ditch Iron Source and Unity ad monetization over the install fee. Unity has also come out and said that Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo will be paying all the install fees if you are on those consoles, to which just imagine a meme of Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo all laughing, because heck no, they're not going to pay install fees. They probably are already upset on the fact that they're paying some amount of server space and bandwidth space to install games. Inherently, this whole idea also just ignores the fact that even if it was being charged by kilobyte instead of just a one-time install fee, Unity could just unilaterally change the rules and bloat its installer base app to being 2, 3, 4 times as big. So instead of installing the core elements of Unity, it would potentially install like several hundred megs of extra data that's unnecessary, which that's bandwidth that is already being eaten up by somebody. Somebody is paying for that bandwidth. But around this, and this is where the bad take is going to come from, Um, and the problem with this is that this is just the standard method of operating when a business gets in trouble, is that they can predictably either wait until there is some kind of ridiculous threat put on Twitter or something from somebody entirely uncredible, like particularly since Twitter and has been around, people have been giving way too much credibility and pretending like crazy people haven't existed and been making threats all the time. Like, you could go down to any bar in any city, hang around for a week, you're going to see somebody making a threat publicly, out loud, to another person, probably in the matter of hours, if not minutes. And yet, because you can maybe get a little bit more documentation, and because a company like Unity needs an excuse to hide behind it, some threats have been made. It's also very easy, and we have to put on the tinfoil hat and consider this, that these threats are not just being made by a crazy person who potentially is on the other side of the planet and really just acting like a troll and doesn't even have a dog in the fight. These threats could be coming from inside the house. It literally could be Unity just VPN'd and made a new account and made a threat against themselves to use it as an excuse to make themselves look like the victim. Because we've gotten into a point where at least a good subset of people in charge of running companies and running PR feel like if they can make themselves look like a victim, then they are winning the argument and that they're being unfairly criticized. Which the only real response to all of this is to say, it's not my concern. I don't care if you're being threatened. If you're being threatened, call the police. Don't come whining to me. Let's just focus on the value of your ideas and the topic at hand, which is that Unity is seemingly trying to screw over a lot of people in favor of making more profits. So yeah. The good news is, for the most part, I did see most people ignore the threats. I did see one other video game company tweet out that they don't condone threats. But yeah, I think even showing any amount of support is the wrong move in these cases. I think the introduction of threats, like it basically should almost come out that if you're mad at somebody like Unity, that your first tweet should be something along the lines of, if somebody makes a threat, I don't know how you'd phrase this. We absolutely do not support Unity or any of the people in charge of making this decision, and we will not be swayed from this position until this decision is fully 100% reversed. We will make no comments on any other future events around Unity until this issue is correctly addressed. Because it is very much a tactic amongst companies and people to just try and change the conversation, just to try to get people to forget. And particularly in this case with Unity, it's the game developers that are going to be irate on this way more than the gamers. Like, so far gamers have not felt the impact of this and won't really feel the impact on this much. However, the game developers have done a pretty admirable, applaudable job of potentially making gamers feel the impact. When Cult of the Lamb says they're going to delete the game due to this pricing change when there's been 3 or 4 game companies that said we're going to start from scratch on a different game engine, which means the games are going to be delayed. Yeah, that does affect gamers. But for the most part, this is developers. And it definitely is a case that if developers hadn't made such a horrible name for themselves, gamers might be more willing to be on their side. But they just aren't. Like, developers really by default should be in a very high level of esteem amongst gamers, and we should hate publishers, and gamers in general should know the difference between a publisher and a developer. But it just doesn't work that way. Publishers have very successfully hidden the fact that they often are the one to blame that a game is bad, and the blame often gets put on developers, which developers do hold some blame for it, but often not as much as you would think. But in general, the people you would mostly be upset about in this case is Unity as an engine maker. In general, gamers don't even know what games are made on which engine. There is an argument that the Bethesda's Starfield engine is showing its age, and increasingly it does seem like reviews for Starfield are spreading out wider, and there's less of a consistent positive feel around Starfield as there once may have been. Which probably is what it deserves. Like, what I haven't noticed personally as somebody who's not playing Starfield or really even seeking out a lot of reviews or comment on that is that there doesn't seem like there is a big element there where something amazing or interesting happens in the middle of the story. It just feels like you kind of do generic things. Which, in all fairness, my understanding of the events of Fallout 4 are fairly limited too. That I know there's the main bad guys. Eventually you reach their base in the main bad guys, and eventually you realize where your son, who you'd been searching for throughout the entirety of Fallout 4, where he went and where he is. But I don't even know that much there. I know there's artifacts of some sort in Starfield. A more tangible complaint might be that there aren't vehicles other than jetpacks and spaceships that teleport, that fast travel you. But yeah, there's no dune buggies or cars in Starfield. Although you don't need a vehicle in Starfield either. More basic complaints I've seen that they need to address is just like you come across something that you can eat and you have to put it in the inventory, then eat it. It doesn't just have a default button to interact / eat something off the shelf or off the vine. Here's a headline not about Unity. We're going to still have a lot of us, that probably highlights some ignorance amongst just Western game developers in general, and just kind of a ridiculous Interesting. So these are now all 0 attack from creatures. I don't think I'm gonna win here. But yeah, the headline is, why do game developers love mechs? Game developers weigh in and the utter perfection of giant mechanical robots. Now, maybe that's just a headline. Maybe this is more of a interview series in which they ask several people to explain their love or spout out their love around mechs. When inherently mechs as an idea come from a accelerated fascination around real machines. Like, it comes from the fact that when we had trains and big trucks and bulldozers and forklifts and cranes and things like that, those are all things that little kids are still fascinated with for a brief time, even in the West. Well, it was more so in Japan's time, because Japan really went from a feudal era where there basically was no long drawn out introductions of steam trains and things like that. It went from no gears, no metal style mechanics at all, to the forced adoption of Western style things, and then a lot of gears and mechanics, and that evolved in a generation to airplanes and weapons of war in World War II, and a specific focus on World War II winning by vast aerial support, which that is something that is an evolution that happened in World War II in particular also, to the point where even the United States didn't think that it was going to win once it had entered World War II based on using airplanes and superior air power. There was a famous author that wrote a book. Walt Disney actually made an animated short based on the book. I think it was called Superiority Through Air Power, something like that. So yeah, when both America and Japan adopted the airplane concept, there was a little bit of fascination of tanks also. Certainly Germany, Nazi Germany, and Russia both pushing heavy amounts of success on tanks, whereas other armies were stood on the backs of horses. So there was definitely a whole generation there that felt like the future was going to be airplanes of war and tanks of war. So what's the evolution of an airplane, a warplane, and a tank? It's a mech. It's something that can move fast, that's heavily armored, that can be controlled by a small number of people, usually one. What does that eventually evolve into? It eventually evolves into things like Robotech, or the 3 enemies that Robotech is based on. Macros, I think maybe a Gundam is one of them, maybe not. Armored Troopers Vulcans, I forget what the 3 enemies that Robotech is based off of, but Robotech as a Western cartoon based off those 3 enemies is where mechs are effectively introduced, as far as what we would call a mech, back to the West. And so that just creates a whole generation there of the kids of the previous generation who are obsessed with mechs, and you see a bunch of anime taking it to a sci-fi extreme, in which this is what a future vehicle of war might look like, although it is something that really would have come from the 60s, 70s, or 80s idea of what the future would look like. It's not really the more optimized form of design that we seemingly would have, as far as just streamlined and smooth elements. And the ideas of like carbon fiber weren't in existence, more to the point where things would get smaller, thinner, lighter. There is a real argument that a US soldier in full armored outfit is as good as a tank in a lot of situations, particularly when you're starting to think of like urban and guerrilla warfare, where there isn't a bunch of empty area either in the air or on the ground. But yeah, that generation of Japanese cartoon fans, anime fans, led to mechs being a big thing. Gundam certainly led to it being super popular. Gundam has been effectively in print and production for 40-50 years, and yes, in modern times there's not a lot of mech animes coming out. Maybe you'll get one per season, maybe you'll only get one per year. There's a lot more fantasy stories happening these days. It's not particularly popular amongst the current generations of anime fans, but Gundam managed to become a cultural treasure, so Gundam's still a thing. Mechs also are super popular in Japan, as they advertise them using model kits and garage kits to build them as a hobby, which is not really a hobby that's done in the West. So that is another thing. And so all of that influence just leads to Japanese game developers making mech games, most of which of the mech games are either directly inspired or licensed based off of anime and older series. Mechs are pretty much non-existent from Western developers though. So yeah. And if you were to take that thought to the extreme, most game developers are not Japanese game developers, which is to say most game developers are not interested in making mechs. But yeah, to continue to baselessly speculate here, some of this just doesn't make sense. Mechs make for good gameplay? I would say that's not true. I would say there's a higher than average percentage of games with mechs that control very clunky, and nowhere as smooth as you might see in an anime or Gundam case. And I'm not jumping into the argument of the difference between like power armor and mechs versus I think there's another thing like a mech that might be slightly different. And clearly this is an argument to talk about Armored Core 6 without actually talking about Armored Core 6. The second headline, strategy game developers love mechs too. It kind of makes sense. They are weapons of war, so if you're set in any kind of futuristic environment, it does make sense to have mechs, but if you look at, say, Command & Conquer Red Alert, there isn't even that many mechs in that game when that came out. Like, the Eastern Empire part, the Japanese Empire had like a Gundam tank, but for the most part, even in the alternate history world of Command & Conquer Red Alert, you just don't have that many mechs. So bringing this back probably doesn't hurt this, because this effect probably only activates when it's destroyed. That'd be my guess as to how this all goes. My default thought is that this is just always the one to summon. And yet, with this lunar deck, it's not working. I went from getting a whole bunch of quick disconnects and easy victories the first day to now seeing real challenge. I definitely should have continued to play. Before the first day. I would say there's far more strategy games that don't have mechs than do, so using the phrase love is fairly inaccurate. Mechs bridge the gap between machines and the people who use them. Robots also do that. Yeah, I guess a robot, again, would be a slight difference between a mech. Yeah, power armor is when you can basically see the human wearing armor, but you can still see the human, where a mech, the person is fully encased in the armor, and a robot, there is no person. Otherwise, it is usually a humanoid looking form of armor. Usually seemingly bipedal. When you think about the robot dogs that they're building to eventually let the Terminators take over the world, I guess, the actual bipedal dogs, and those don't look anything like mechs at all. And probably never would. If anything, it would make a lot more sense to make something cheap and in bulk than to try to armor something that's robotic. And it makes a lot of sense to make everything robotic instead of trying to armor a human. And at a certain level, thank goodness, I guess, for the UN war crimes laws, chemical warfare really makes way more sense, or microscopic nanobot warfare makes a lot more sense. Which I don't know if there really is anything that would stop a country from developing nanobots that it could just spray from the air down on the citizens and then infect them with some kind of chemical to make them pass out or kill them, probably kill them, or just nanobots rain down in small amounts and then they get attached to people and then immobilize them in some way. Some kind of like thing where they get sticky or they get heavy and just crush people and then move on to the next thing, or that they heat seek and kill all life in an area. Like, that is almost certainly a better dark future of warfare than making giant mech characters. It would be cheaper to just use bullets. Moving on, since I'm rambling about that mech editorial advertisement, Wizardry, the first ever party-based RPG, is being remade by Digital Eclipse. Let's see. Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord. I assume this may be the first ever party-based RPG in digital form, 1981, because almost certainly before 1981 there would have been party-based RPGs in the form of Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. It says Wizardry is generally agreed to be the first ever party-based RPG video game and one of the first Dungeons and Dragons style RPGs made for computers. Which, yeah. Should should probably look and see what that looks like, because whatever they're showing here is going to be drastically different from what it originally looked like. Here's what it originally looked like. Just a green, this might be a TRS-80 type input. The Trash 80, as it was lovingly referred to, from Tandy Radio Shack, Tandy Corporation, Tandy Relay Systems, maybe. Very, very early computer. Now the remake here does look way more visual. That being said, I don't know if the story is particularly that interesting around wizardry, or if there really was any kind of story. And you're remaking a very old game from '81 in a field where there has been a lot of evolution and a lot of competition, whether you want to admit it or not, from particularly Japan. Persona 3, all of the Persona series, effectively a dungeon crawler, effectively doing what wizardry does. I'm just gonna set this and see what happens. Plenty of other lesser known things. I think Moero Chronicle might be a dungeon crawler. Effectively, most JRPGs are dungeon crawlers, they're just not in dungeons. That Mary Skelter game that was recently announced was a dungeon crawler. We might be seeing less and less dungeon crawlers being released in the future, but yeah, there's plenty of them already. And arguably, I'd say dungeon crawling games are a good style of game to potentially move towards more mobile gaming. You're not really expecting that much from a dungeon crawler. I'm not sure if dungeon crawling as games are that good of an idea in the first place, but it would certainly make some sense to take the weaker concepts of dungeon crawling and grinding and move it to mobile. There is also a good argument to move it to automation, so it's more of an idle game in general. The dungeon aspect of dungeon crawlers is fairly unnecessary, though. The big difference between a dungeon crawler game and a game that just says this is challenge level 1-1 and then you'll go to challenge level 1-2 is fairly minimal. Let's see. The Among Us developer predicts install fees concessions instead of reversal after a call with Unity. This is another GameDeveloper.com article. Notably, GameDeveloper.com is getting a lot of articles around this Unity thing, which is, in fairness, just highlights that game developers are upset with this Unity situation way more than any of the other mainstream video game journalist sites. Baldur's Gate 3's next major patch and full Mac support are coming next week. Splatoon 3's DLC expansion pass side order is launching in the spring of 2024, which this just now reminds me that the Nintendo Direct happened, and it was a very full of game announcements. It did not announce any hardware. Most of the game announcements, though, are either very predictable things or a few remakes. I was watching some YouTuber, Ant Dude, which I don't know if he's actually a big YouTuber or not, watching the Direct, and he literally started crying at the big reveal at the end, but he said the rest of the stream was fairly mid, to use younger people's speech. Which, yeah, I would say not impactful. as far as most of the announcements. Now this screenshot for this expansion of Side Order is weird. I just feel like it's out of place for Splatoon to have a world that is completely white or in these shades of gray. But I think that's probably the idea, is that this is some DLC where they're going to get to a world that's completely colorless, and it's either going to be really difficult to get color and paint things in, or it's going to be a goal to paint in the entire world. Either way is an interesting evolution of the gameplay concept. And I really do have to applaud the grays here, instead of just having a blank white world, which is what people like the makers of a lot of the areas in Mirror's Edge just went with. It's just pure 0, 0, 0 as far as the red, green, blue value. Having shading can be very helpful there. Right. I still really have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing, but I somehow just wandered into doing things. Let's go with no on that one. I probably, if I had a little bit more assistance, or any assistance at all, let me rephrase that. I don't have any assistance. If I had an assistant, I probably would have him take all the video game news and put it in one chunk, so I'm not bouncing back between conversations here. But that's exactly what I'm doing today, pretty terribly. Usually I don't have 5 articles all around the same thing, but here's game developer .com again addressing the Unity issue, this time perhaps in a much more creative and constructive way. The generous space of alternate game engines. We, in the last stream, looked at all the alternate game engines, but they're, in general, covering a few as far as a curation. So, a significant number of game engines that are going to not be direct comparisons. Godot engine here is saying it's a free all-in-one cross-platform game engine that makes it easy for you to create 2D and 3D games. Even between Unity engine and Unreal engine, though, you would mostly go with Unreal engine for 3D, and I mostly would have gone with Unity for 2D games. I'd love, if I was in charge of the game company, to have everybody on the Godot engine, or at least investigate that the Godot engine is actually open source and isn't going to change its rules or change its licensings. But yeah, I could, when you have potentially a team of maybe 50 programmers at most, if 5 of those 50 programmers are used to using Unreal Engine and just don't want to learn how to use Godot engine, just don't want to learn how to use Unity, well, either you fire and replace those 5 highly skilled engineers, or you have to just capitulate and have have your game developed based on whatever engine your existing player base knows. Let's see if this works. She'll summon this like this. I, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, Yeah, I'm not gonna summon anything at the moment. Let's just see if we can pull this off. Let's see what happens when we summon this. We have to activate this. Then let's see. Don't want to do that. You either want to do this or you want to do this. Nope, can't do that. So there may not actually be an option here. Yeah. Doesn't look like there is. Another game at the Nintendo Direct was Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, which is launching in summer of 2024. This is changing the name to just Luigi's Mansion 2 instead of what it originally was called, unless I'm completely confused here, which was Luigi's Mansion Dark Side of the Moon. From what I hear, Luigi's Mansion 2 is not that good, and I think it was originally on the 3DS. Or maybe it wasn't Dark Side of the Moon, maybe it was The Dark Moon or something like that, but but yeah, that's it. It is wiser to call it Luigi's Mansion 2. We have a Video Games Chronicle article. The Nintendo Museum in Japan will open in Kyoto next year, which Nintendo of Japan is still based in the old capital, Japan, Kyoto. So this museum is effectively going to be in the same location. I imagine Kyoto is one of the few remaining still successful cities in Japan, as the buildings are falling apart and really just they need a housing boom of some sort to really happen, and just a revitalization projects like crazy. They basically need a New Deal concept. Just rethinking how the economics and the and society in general is going to run in Japan, outside of Tokyo in particular. Can't just have one major city, mega city. Is there a reason to summon something? Let's just assume there is, since I changed the position of that anyways. Plus 300 attack if we detached this. But then I could just evolve this way. I guess that probably ends what we can do. It's important to point out that having Nintendo own the Museum of Nintendo, though, is not the best idea ever. Yes, there probably should be a Nintendo museum run by Nintendo, but if at any point Nintendo, in a very Japanese way, wanted to like erase history and get rid of, say, Mario as a character or Wario as a character, it would be very easy for them to justify and just delete historical things. That's why it is almost always a better case for museums to be independent. Nice if they're well funded and stable, but independent nonetheless. That way there is a true passion for preserving history and not overemphasizing on things inaccurately. Like, in a lot of ways, I wouldn't be surprised if this museum is a very large gift shop and promoting just the newest stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if there's very little talk, if any, about the Virtual Boy. I don't know if they're going to bother to talk about anything before Famicom as far as Nintendo is concerned. I don't know how much space they really have, so their collection may be fairly small in the first place. Plus, it's a new museum in general, so it'll take it a while to effectively figure out the best ways to do things. Another game that was announced was called Another Code Recollection, or Recollection, which I believe is a remake of point-and-click adventure games. I would have thought they were visual novels. Another Code 2 Memories, known as Trace Memory in Europe, and Another Code R, A Journey into Lost Memories. Which, yeah, I almost thought that this was a case where it was going to be a remake of that VR game, but I believe the VR game I'm thinking of is already on the Switch, which I couldn't even tell you what the VR game is I'm thinking of. It's one where you're effectively in VR strapped to a wheelchair, and then there's this anime girl with green hair that you instruct on how to solve puzzles. But that's not what this is. This is a point-and-click puzzle game with a ghost boy. You can see she's walking around. I feel like this may have originally been a 2DS game, and it might have been one of those, of which there was more than you would think, where you're writing on the screen to solve puzzles, or you're closing the 2DS to solve a puzzle. There was a Link game, a Zelda game like that, where you had to literally close and shut down the 2DS hinged game console to solve the puzzle. Like you would have ever thought of being able to do that. It's really a gimmick. Yeah, I'm still not sure why the audio jumps around as soon as videos start playing on Firefox. But another remake that's coming out is Mario vs. Donkey Kong. This is, I assume, more of a remake than a remaster. This would have been, again, a mobile game where you're doing more of a puzzle thing to solve. You're controlling these little mech Marios a lot of times, these little robotic wind-up Marios. And yeah, here you can see he's stolen all these little wind-up Marios. It's almost like a Lemmings game. And it would definitely be the, like, last time we've seen Mario and Donkey Kong properly on the opposite sides. There was, I believe, a lot of, like, I don't know if it was cards or 3DS, almost like DLC levels that you had to do weird things to unlock. This definitely is a throwback to Donkey Kong Jr. in this level, in Donkey Kong 1. I guess you aren't really controlling the little mini robots. I thought you were. It actually doesn't look like you are. This is an example, almost certainly, of a remake of a game that originally wasn't actually a Mario game in the first place, and that this would have just been something similar, reskinned. in the original pitch of it, and then Nintendo decided to fund it and said make it Mario and Donkey Kong. But even at that, it's kind of crazy to have Donkey Kong stealing wind-up Mario toys instead of kidnapping a girl. Even when this game originally came out, though, they were at that point where it wasn't reasonable for Pauline or Daisy or Princess Peach to be kidnapped by a gorilla. Or a monkey. Gorilla, I guess he is. It's probably the #1 Mario game that you could buy recently to be disappointed in, though, in that it is definitely not going to feel like Mario Odyssey. Although, you know, there are some other Mario games that may play a little wonky. I personally don't know if I really would ever want to play Mario Wonder, which noticeably they didn't really talk too much about that. These Nintendo Directs just like, here's a trailer, here's a trailer, here's a trailer. I am doing better, I think, these days about not getting DMCA content ID'd by Nintendo trailers, which I'd have to assume that's just dumb luck more than Nintendo or my blur or my actions, just as far as watching the entirety of the videos. Here we have another GameDeveloper.com article. It's basically going to go through them all today, I bet. The Star Wars Jedi director Stig Amusen is leaving EA. He worked on early God of War games for Sony Santa Monica and the 2011 Mortal Kombat reboot. So, yeah. I would think that there was more work to be done yet on Star Wars Jedi as a series. But people leave for all different reasons. And the reason they state... well, in this case, he didn't even specify a specific reason, but the reason they state, even when they do specify, is often just nonsense. The Princess Peach game has a title now. It's called Princess Peach Showtime, and it launches March 22nd, 2024. Which, yeah, definitely feels like they're oversaturating the Mario and Friends franchises here, and Princess Peach Showtime is probably not going to be given a good chance to actually succeed here. March is not a big month for video games to sell in the first place, but if you have Paper Mario 1000 Years Doors and Mario RPG and Mario vs. Donkey Kong all releasing within those first few months, this is going to be a lesser known experience. I suspect maybe they're hoping that you get maybe some kind of pushback from like the Barbie movie, although by the time March rolls around I don't know how many people are still going to be thinking that way as far as just raw feminism, as far as the Barbie movie concept. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the first and last Princess Peach game for decades. Now, what fixes this, that Doom thought, is if there's an actual interesting game here. But I'm not 100% sure I believe there is, because you're seeing a lot of variety here in which she's playing different roles, I assume, on the stage where she's cooking, so I assume there might be a stacking or cooking mini game, and then she's doing a fireball kick over here, so maybe she's doing some kind of fighting or rhythm game, and then she's doing some swashbuckling sword fighting, so I'd assume there would be a sword fighting mini game. And then you have her in a more normal form with a different kind of star, which maybe implies that she's trying to collect stars, but that may not be collecting stars in a 3D platforming collectathon style. It may be getting stars for accomplishing specific minigame tasks. Banish that, banish that, banish that. Let's go ahead and banish that one. Which one's in the hand? Those are in the hands, that's in the graveyard. So banish from the graveyard. This lets me send the thing to the graveyard. Let's go ahead and activate this and see what happens. So, yeah. Not sure if I really watched all of this. So you start with Princess Peach, walking around, getting an introduction. Let's just skip. Here you have a bad girl, girl on girl competition of some sort. And then her hair's put up in a bow, which, yeah. It looks to me like it's a stage-based, almost Paper Mario concept. Darn it. You know what? On surrendering because I took too long, I think that's probably a good point to stop playing. And it definitely feels like it's you switch into different modes to have different abilities. So effectively, this is a Metroidvania. Is this the death of Samus Aran in favor of having Princess Peach be the Metroidvania hero for a new generation? Maybe that's exactly what they're trying to do here. But yeah, it feels like it might be more of a almost point and click escape to room concept though, where you're on a specific stage and you have a specific goal, almost like Psychonauts. But yeah, I wouldn't really use that comparison. So you have to transform yourself. Maybe eventually you're switching between different styles. This is interesting, perhaps pandering to mainland China in that outfit. Yeah. Still seems fairly difficult to figure out exactly what you're doing here. I definitely would want more of an explanation. Transform to fit the role and use show-stopping abilities to save the day. Fend off the Sour Bunch with sensational swordplay as a sword fighter. Yep. So it's very much a transforming game as a concept. Though. Now, I wouldn't be 100% surprised if this isn't more thinking along the lines of being a probably not a gacha game in that you're just gonna constantly pay for more transformations and more outfits. That would be a little crazy for Nintendo. But there is a dress-up game, a girl game, that's in development as a AAA game that's more fashionista about it, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of the concept. Although, to get back to my previous thought, I wonder if I really would feel that bad even if they made more Metroid-like games by compromising and having Princess Peach be the heroine. That effectively lets you get away from the darker visual themes of Samus Aran and Metroid. It lets you get away from Metroid in general. It lets you get away from fighting the same types of enemies over and over again. At the end of the day, I think I probably would prefer more video games with different characters versus less video games, just because Samus Aran is the historically relevant character in that series. It's not like I even have that specific of an amount of love around Samus Aran. There's actually still a decent amount of daily quest stuff to do, but you know what, I'm just gonna ignore it. We're making progress in the gold pass, and none of that ever matters. Crafting points insignificantly small numbers don't really help. F-Zero did come back in a form called F-Zero 99, which makes me assume that it is similar to the other 99 series of games, in that it is going to be a mobile game only, where you're playing against or with a bunch of people, and then it will be abandoned into the 4 years, which the second I see anything with 99 in the name at this point, I'm not particularly that hyped. But the artist for F-Zero has thanked Nintendo for bringing the series back. Looking at the art here, though, it's pretty easy to understand why this art wouldn't 100% work. And even here, you've got a different art style than what this is. We may have more news on F-Zero 99 proper, but yeah, I'm not particularly inspired by that announcement, just because 99's behind it. And then we have another GameDeveloper.com article here, how to make your own C++ game engine, which that is incredibly crazy at that point. You're talking in very simplistic concepts, like what it would take to make a C++ game engine. And Game Developer is effectively putting out an article here asking people to reinvent the wheel that is being reinvented multiple times already. Like, on top of that, I also have to point out, why in the world would you, even with the most modern version of C++, make a new engine using C++? Why not exclusively make it C#, or exclusively make it Rust? Which Rust, in the long run, has a decent chance of having games be less crashy overall. I heard a story basically saying that Starfield is programmed intentionally poorly, or programmed so poorly, perhaps not intentionally, in that it's making and abusing an API call to DirectX, which it shouldn't be making, and that is causing resources to be wasted on trying to create frames that actually don't matter, because you'll never actually see them. It's trying to do speculative processing, saying, we speculate that this is the next action that's going to happen, so go ahead and render the frame and run the engine one tick ahead in the future, as if this choice has already been made, so it will already be rendered. Which speculative processing can work if you have the power for it, but it really can't work if you don't have the power for it, and the DirectX and CPUs and GPUs don't have the power for it in something like Starfield. Plus, if it takes you 2 nanoseconds to make 1 nanosecond's worth of frames, then you're in an effective processing debt that will just get worse and worse and worse, because the second you have even more lag, and then it takes you 3 nanoseconds to make 1 nanosecond of frames, you're even further behind. And ideally in games, without really over explaining it, you want to be producing over 60 frames for the 60 frames per second monitor you might have hooked up, or over 120 frames or 100 frames for a 100 hertz monitor that you're connected, not less than that. Or you need to implement some kind of mechanism to duplicate frames instead of generating each frame uniquely. Let's see, we'd already talked about Princess Peach Showtime. It kind of makes more sense to bring Daisy out, though, and try and use her. This guy tweeted, and he pointed out that John Riccatello, who runs Unity, John Riccatello, Unity CEO, also bought and shut down Sierra, Westwood, Bullfrog, and others just for the intellectual property rights, of which very few of them have been used. And this is when he was in charge of EA, during what he's saying is the most awful years of EA as the CEO, COO. Which, yeah, even remembering that Westwood Games and Bullfrog Games are owned by EA is forgetful. And certainly, he has been a inflammatory person, as they're quoting here. If studios don't consider monetization in their games during the creative process, they're an effing idiot, is the quote here. So, yeah. People probably should have seen this coming, and it definitely is a new statement or renewal of the statement that you should probably investigate the people you might be going into business with. Not that you probably have that much of a chance. I imagine you're in bed with a lot of nasty people or greedy people, at least in the video game world. If you're using Unity engine, if you're using Unreal Engine, if you're using any engine, there's probably somebody who is all about making money and greedy in that chain of leadership. And even if it's not an engine, just dealing with publishers, imagine if people had a choice, they wouldn't want to deal with the likes of the people at Microsoft or Xbox and Sony or Nintendo. I think Nintendo probably hides it pretty well, but they're also extremely greedy jerks too. In this, I don't have the time to go on another rant, but it is a great example that if everybody was just on something like universal basic income and could just follow their passions, then people who are greedy, people who have been put in positions of power or fought their way to positions of power because they're greedy for power and money, would not really have a place in that system. If I personally could just sit around and program video games because I had a passion for programming video games, then I don't have to deal with the likes of Riccatello or any of the publishing platforms or anything like that. I could just put it out on the internet for free once I'm done, and I wouldn't care about if a game sold. Which inherently that gets back to the main problem of Unity, is that a lot of people who were making Unity games, or even now are making Unity games, did want to just make their first video game to show off their prowess and put it out for free via Steam Direct, which you really can't do with this new scheme. It's just not going to be financially viable to have your game free if it's a Unity game. It's not, I think, even financially viable to have Unity taught in colleges and in schools as a programming language. So colleges and schools are traditionally very far behind from the newest of languages and engines to use. But yeah, we may see a shift here, and that even major colleges suddenly get rid of Unity engine programming classes in favor of some other engine. They'll probably not get rid of the classes, they'll probably switch to a different engine. Let's see. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's creative director has revealed where the game ends. Rebirth is the second part of a 3-part Final Fantasy VII remake. This is a Video Games Chronicle article, so I guess check this out if you're interested. It's just such a it's kind of hard to get into these games that, since it's going to take them so long to release all of it. Final Fantasy VII Remake and Remake Integrate have topped 7 million sales according to GameDeveloper.com. Here's the death threats in which they closed 2 offices. I certainly don't care to cover it any further than that. Like, it's just not relevant information. This could happen to any business at any time, and I don't know how serious any of that really has to be taken. This install fee is very much like a convenience fee, where you go to a store and then they're charging you $1 to use a credit card when they literally wouldn't take cash, or they charge you more if you took cash. So you're getting screwed one way or the other. And yeah, these junk fees, garbage fees, always should be cracked down more. Of course, it's not like you can just call up the police and have them come arrest a manager at a company if they're charging a convenience fee. You can dispute a convenience fee all you want, I guess. This was a slightly bigger announcement, but weirdly, being published by Aspire Media instead of Embracer Group or THQ Nordic, and it looks like Aspire and Crystal Dynamics worked on this, which is probably to say Aspire worked on this. This is Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3 remastered, whereas Tomb Raider Anniversary was kind of a reimagining remake of 1, 2, and 3, that instead of being direct one-for-one layouts of the levels. Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3 are not really playable on modern computers, so this needed to happen. This inherently pushes us back to a focus of Lara Croft with the hot pants and the 2 guns and the tank top and the big boobs, but it is a new art style. At any point you can switch between the 2 different art styles. They're not really trying for anything amazing here. It's all the visuals are definitely targeting the Nintendo Switch, which is what this was announced in as part of the Nintendo Direct here. It's always nice when you have these remasters that you can go back and forth and switch the visuals. It's a shame there isn't an actual video here on Steam around this, but yeah, it includes Tomb Raider 1 and the Unfinished Business expansion, and secret levels, Tomb Raider 2 and the Gold Mask expansion, and Tomb Raider 3 and the Lost Artifact expansion. Tomb Raider 4 may be actually playable, having recently finished the Tomb Raider reboot series with not much enthusiasm for that. It definitely seems like we are done from there, and I would say even the graphics of Tomb Raider Anniversary might be much more ambitious as far as the way it looked. Tomb Raider Legends and Tomb Raider Underworld could be, I'd have to double check to figure out which of these which of the Tomb Raider games are actually Tomb Raider 4. But here you can see Tomb Raider 1, and the graphics really aren't that far off. Just slightly worse faces and one big triangle boob. And low polygons on the legs and things like that. Yeah. Here they've just done some soft CGI to smooth it around. To the point where I'd almost assume that this is running an engine that really couldn't handle much more graphics. Instead of them bothering to remaster this, this may very well just be a very optimized emulation engine that's emulating the same code of the original game. But I am somewhat excited that at least my journey of playing the Tomb Raider games, a series I never touched when I was young and when it was originally coming out, can potentially continue. Although it would be much more exciting for them to announce something new. Almost certainly, though, again, I would say we are going to see more of a femme fatale adventurer Indiana Jones ripoff Tomb Raider, with probably dual guns, probably hot pants, and probably with a tank top. We're almost certainly done with the remake of Tomb Raider. The remake Lara Croft, who is not as interesting of a character. She just really didn't have that much of a personality, and she didn't really feel like she was a hero as much as she should. She never grew into that over the entire trilogy. So yeah, here you can see they're swiping between the graphics at the very beginning there. Of course, the blur is on. But you can also fairly guess that they may not really be remastering the graphics that much for a lot of the other creatures. It definitely feels like she stands out as being the one they focused on visually, and then the rooms and the enemies are second pass concepts. As the swipes, like, barely anything seems to be changing. Of course, yes, this is blurred, and this is, yeah, not a huge thing. Apparently it is running on the Unreal Engine 5. I wouldn't be surprised if we find out that this is some form of fairly automated, perhaps even AI generated visuals, as far as just redoing the textures to speed things up and justify making a game like this. Also, though, I would say a lot of these announcements are happening in February and March of 2024. They are getting these games out quickly before they announce the Switch 2, which does perhaps indicate that the Switch 2 will not be backward compatible. Otherwise, why would you rush like that? Unless the Switch 2 is going to announce a ton of new games. F-Zero 99 was announced for Nintendo Switch, and it's out today. It's a massive multiplayer game. Yeah. And visually, from the looks of it, it definitely feels like it is just in line with the level of graphics of the Super NES F-Zero game, which is in line with the graphics of the original Super NES Mario Kart game. Yeah. Racing against 99 other players as a concept is not terrible as an idea, although I question if there really are 99 other players all sending out signals and being synchronized, or if it isn't more of a case that at most there's 20 or 30 players in front of you, and then the rest are all just faked. Yeah, and there's definitely looks like there's slightly different things happening here with F-Zero than what you would have in Mario Kart, just less fighting each other with weapons and similar, probably a little bit fewer shortcuts. I imagine F-Zero, at least now, is trying to be the more professional racing game, where Mario Kart was more of the kid-friendly racing game. Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door is coming to Switch, which I never played that game, but yeah. Scored an 87 on Metacritic. It came out in 2004. It clearly is fairly well received, or was. Final Fantasy VII Remake and digital sales have topped 7 million. We already talked about that. That's from Komatsu. Starfield will enlist for official mod support in early 2024. Enlist is probably a weird word to use there. I assume they are shooting or attempting for official mod support. I heard a YouTuber talking about how Nexus Mods has come out and officially said that they will not allow mods for Starfield to remove the pronouns feature in Starfield, which I guess Nexus Mods can do whatever it wants. It seems a little weird when Nexus Mods is like known for allowing like rape play and the sexual assault simulator mods on Skyrim, that they're drawing a line anywhere. I suppose a certain thing, if it's really illegal, it probably wouldn't be allowed on Nexus Mods, but that'd be about the line there. I could see maybe making an argument that you're removing content from the game and thus going in the wrong direction as far as altering the creator's intent, but you're already doing that even if you're adding content there, so seems weird. As far as I know, the pronouns in Starfield are things that people will rant about in any game and not particularly unique or special, and not even implemented well, and that you'll get misgendered even if you use the wrong pronoun, the pronouns feature anyways. Whole pronouns thing to me comes off a lot like it's just a wedge issue that people on the internet like to ramble about, kind of like gay marriage in the past was used as a wedge issue that people would rant about. It doesn't really have to affect your life too much. You're almost certainly not going to run into somebody that flips out if you use the wrong pronoun once, and if you do run into somebody like that, they're probably a jerk and you just don't want to deal with them in the first place. Now, I get it if they tell you your pronouns and then you intentionally misgender them over and over again, that they might get mad, but yeah. I don't think too many people run into those scenarios on a day-to-day basis for it to really ever affect you or significantly affect you. Let the games have more options, who cares? Speaking of transgendered people, though, Jim Sterling is back to being called Jim Sterling or James Stephanie Sterlington, as his kind of, I think, stage name, or her stage name. Let me correct myself there. I think she really did transition about a year ago, and for the most part, I think that probably hurt her YouTube channel severely, because his persona of Jim Sterling, the persona of Jim Sterling, was fairly big and fairly popular, and renaming your YouTube channel, changing what your YouTube channel is about in any way, really kills it and loses a bunch of your audience. Of course, in the case of the former Jim Sterling, he was already losing a lot of his audience because he was getting extremely repetitive in the content he was making, and he's made not as much content. He's gone as a personality full clown and was just too much about wrestling and drama. So yeah, I haven't even thought of Jim Sterling in over a year, as I just unsubscribed from his channel once I stopped really getting any value out of watching his videos. perhaps he failed to evolve for a little bit, but mostly I think he just evolved too much. Evolved in one way and transitioning too much, and changing his channel name, and evolved too little in his content. Moving on, Red Hook Studios has put out a big picture. Let's see if we can make it any bigger and actually read it. Let's see. We believe Unity has made a grave misstep in introducing a poorly thought out fee mechanic, and then compounded threefold by making it apply to games that have already been released. We are sympathetic to the idea that companies sometimes can change how they operate, but these changes should be carefully planned, communicated, and enacted in such a way that partners may choose whether they wish to accept these new rules for the next projects. They built Darkest Dungeon using Unity, and a large part of our decision was to do so as relative cost certainty around the license and subscription model. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on licenses and far more than that in engaging Unity to help us with parts of development. It's hard for us to imagine building another game with Unity unless we know how we are protected from the possibility of mass changes to how to pay for technology being introduced at the whims of an executive management. Part of the game development is knowing the mechanic is not working and then having the courage to swallow your ego and undo the mistake we call in Unity to recant this blunder. Now, it's kind of funny that Red Hook Games, the makers of Darkest Dungeon and Darkest Dungeon 2, is talking about how a mechanic doesn't work, because arguably I personally would say I don't think Darkest Dungeon's game mechanic is that good, and I don't think it works. But ignoring that personal opinion, yeah, they're not really saying anything definitive here, and arguably they're using Unity's logo without without actually owning it. But I guess this probably would fall under parody too. Somebody made a post here on Twitter, I saw, that was pretending to be Unity, just saying we've heard you, we just don't care, as a statement. And it's real important to highlight satire when you do a big wall picture of text like that. Otherwise people will take it as not being sarcastic. There is almost certainly grounds for a lawsuit that they're retroactively going to try and charge people. Like, I don't know if they really have as good of a legal standing as they think as far as Unity goes, to retroactively try and charge this new fee when you'd already paid fees. Even if you were paying a per month fee or a per sales fee, there's something to be said in the law about not doing a bait and switch, which effectively this is what it is. Unity has done a bait and switch. They baited in game developers to develop games for years, and then they've switched the fee structure on them. Let's see. Resident Evil 4's remake DLC Separate Ways launches September 21st, and the PlayStation VR 2 mode launches this winter. Separate Ways is an element in the original Resident Evil 4, but it will be, I assume, remade. So can I find the DLC here for Separate Ways? Or is it not here yet? Doesn't look like it's here yet. So yeah. So they're showing off the VR mode, which I don't really care about. Let's see if we can find the Separate Ways mode. if I'm thinking of the right expansion for Separate Ways, this is the one where Ada Wong is connecting into the main story and helping out Leon, but while still hiding from the shadows. She spends a lot of her time fighting the same enemies or going through the same locations a second time in slightly different instances, or in the first time before Leon reaches the area. I'm not sure they're really showing that much to take from all of that, but it is showing you what a new Wesker looks like more, and what Ada Wong looks like in her red sweater, getting away from the Chinese red dress. I imagine the Separate Ways DLC will be as well received as the rest of Resident Evil 4 was, but noticeably here, and this is where my chart might come into more information, is that 6 months later, like that Resident Evil 4, like 6 months, a year later after Resident Evil 4 Remake comes out, there's just not going to be a lot of talk by mainstream video game journalists or advertisement for the game. So only by having SteamDB polled and sampled every few days would I know how many people are still potentially playing Resident Evil 4 by the time this DLC comes out, and just relatively speaking how popular it still is. Particularly in the case of Resident Evil 4, it definitely feels like a game that you don't need to play instantaneously. You can easily play it a few years later. You know what I probably should do is turn off the filters and just turn down the audio on some of this. That might be what's causing the problem here, because as far as other audio sources, whenever I play a video, well, I don't really know the reason why it's happening. I'll have to think about it. It might be a case that the audio does stop. First thing I should do though is just have the auto mute plugin installed again and try that. I'm kind of rambling here. A Foam Stars open beta is going to take place at the end of September, which definitely makes it feel like Foam Stars is coming out earlier than I thought it was. Foam Stars again is going to try to be something a little bit like Splatoon. No, what this red circle is all about really here. But it also is trying to be like an older teenagers Splatoon, and it'll be interesting to see if that competition can really happen. But it is also coming from Square Enix, so I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't sell enough for Square Enix, or if it doesn't get enough support for the long term. Oh, this red circle is actually the trigger on her foam gun. Godot engine. Let's see. What is this saying? What was I trying to point out here on the Godot engine? Let's see. Apparently the Godot Development Fund just passed 30,000 pounds, which I assume maybe that's 30,000 pounds a month. Otherwise that is a really small amount to fund the development of the Godot engine. But yeah, it is questionable just how many people are getting paid, or how many people are actually working on the Godot engine. But yeah, they definitely have been milking support as much as possible. And I would have to investigate it more, but I definitely would say if you twisted my arm and said, find a new engine, the Godot engine would be my pick. You can see it's version 3.5.3, release candidate 1 is their most recent release. But then they're working on a version 4.2, development build 4 also. That's a pretty big difference. I would assume 3.5 is the last major version for the version 3, and then 4.2 is major breaking changes for new development. You probably wouldn't want to transition something from version 3.5 to 4.0 or 4.2, and so then the release candidates for 3.5.2 is probably bug fixes or security patches, minor stability things. I didn't prepare enough water today. I'm gonna wear out my voice. Let's see. GameDeveloper.com also says Ubisoft is shutting down its London office. Ubisoft London shutdown marks the first big studio to close its doors in the month of September, which is to say basically nothing. Now, see, if I was to try to make a chart based on all the big news, which would be another thing to potentially make an end of the year video around, is what's all the big news happening and what were people talking about throughout the year. That would be incredibly more difficult. I'd have to basically search for specific keywords in every headline, or tag every news article based on something, every game being mentioned or every event being mentioned. It would be much more difficult. And inherently, I think that probably wouldn't be worth the effort, because an end of the year video wrap up of which I'm not sure end of the year videos even matter that much, talking about what people were talking about in January and February probably is fairly irrelevant. Like, it's much more positive, at least, to focus on what games people are playing, because gamers play games. We don't inherently want to make our life all about talking about gaming news and drama. That isn't the desire of a real gamer, in my opinion. That's the desire of somebody who just wants to internet troll or just likes drama. But yeah, Ubisoft shutting down an office definitely is just another indication that Ubisoft is doing worse and worse. Mortals of Avium's developer Ascendant Studios has laid off nearly half of its staff. The CEO, Brett Robbins, says it was a painfully difficult but necessary decision. So was half of their staff a QA people? That is questionable. Immortals of Avium, I'm not even sure. I wasn't even sure it had come out, but apparently it came out on August 22nd and definitely was just not given enough advertisement by EA. And arguably, I would say it didn't get the right kind of advertisement, because nobody really knows what the game is, or it really was a game they needed more people to play. But yeah, sadly, we're hearing more stories of these companies putting out a game and then very quickly everybody being laid off on that game. So I would not particularly expect a lot of support for Mortals of Avium. I wouldn't expect any DLC. I wouldn't expect it to even be relevant. Let's see. DreamHack has tapped a person named Guy Bloomberg to oversee its North American festivals. Bloomberg's previous experience with trade show events like E3 and Comic-Con will be used to help make DreamHack a better festival and celebration of all types of video games. Which, yeah, somewhat worth mentioning that COVID is still coming and going, so these kinds of events are still fairly questionable. It'll be interesting to see how the Tokyo Game Show is attended when it happens in maybe just a couple of days. I think maybe the 18th is when the Tokyo Game Show starts. That would make some sense. The Steam Deck is on sale again, but I do question if maybe we aren't right on the verge of a second generation announcement for the Steam Deck, or perhaps mid-generation refresh, whatever they want to describe it as. I did see on Slick Deals a M2 keyed Wi-Fi chip, but I don't believe the Steam Deck actually has its Wi-Fi chips in an M2 key slot. So there is a M2 key key type like A for memory in the Steam Deck, and you can replace that, but you have to be very careful about the sizes you get to make sure it's compatible. But it doesn't have the key type E, which I believe is the Wi-Fi one, nor does it have external antennas built into it. So for this Wi-Fi 6E chipset that was on sale for like $11, which is pretty cheap, you really wouldn't be able to just easily replace it. And that's certainly something that they could think about doing, although in all fairness, I'm not sure you really need to upgrade to 6E or even from Wi-Fi 5 to Wi-Fi 6 overall. Although Steam Deck has much better argument for multi-channel connections and faster downloads and potentially even streaming there than most devices do. But yeah, Steam Deck is on sale for the 20th anniversary, which they changed the 20th anniversary front page of Steam for like one day, then they changed it back. It was all green, which I guess Steam originally was green, and I wouldn't be surprised if they actually, Steam is now slightly less blue than it once was. Yes, it is my suspicion that they're slowly just trying to make everything black themed. But yeah, in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, you can get it cheaper via Komodo. You can also buy it until September 21st with a 21% discount. Now, up to a 20% discount if you buy the biggest one, 10% discount if you buy this in the Western world, 20% discount on a fairly expensive dock. You could probably be fairly safe on buying the dock, though. If we quickly look over this, I could see trying to get twice as much RAM. I could see getting twice as much storage just by default. 64 is probably too low. Yeah, socketed 2230 M2 modules, not intended for end user. End user replacement. So I think that's 22 millimeters thick and 30 millimeters long. No, it's probably 22 meters wide and 30 millimeters tall. 1280 by 800 is probably fine. The nits at 400 is probably fine. Bluetooth 5.0 is kind of low. But yeah, by default, the Wi-Fi in the Steam Deck is already 2x2 MIMO AC, which would be Wi-Fi 5. Anyways, I think AC is Wi-Fi 5, not AX. But yeah, as I was thinking about, could you actually put a new Wi-Fi chip in a Steam Deck if you really started to solder it on directly onto the board? Would it be worth it? And yeah, it really wouldn't be worth it. I think I got moved around here a little bit. Remember, the refurbed versions of the Steam Deck are probably still available also, so there is perhaps a better choice in getting a refurbed unit than to get a 20% off unit. As I think about it, though, a new version of the Steam Deck as a refresh of the hardware almost won't have any external visible differences there. Yeah, and I was thinking about like Linux support on the drivers for SteamOS. Like you very well might not be able to swap out a new Wi-Fi module without rebuilding the kernel for SteamOS and making a custom kernel. Unless Steam and Valve are going to get rid of the touchpads or redo its interface and its button layout, I imagine a Steam Deck 2 is going to, on the outside, look almost exactly the same, and then the Steam Deck 2 on the inside, you would hope, has just better battery life, better internal components, more storage would be nice. Certainly, more RAM would be nice, but you're not really expecting too much. You're not going up to 4K resolution or anything like that, and you're maybe could get better speakers. Moving on, I need to make more progress today. Supergiant is doing early access again with Hades 2, which I don't know if you really need to be allowed to do early access for the sequel to your game, but whatever. This inevitably, for any game, creates a situation where the vast majority of popularity of your game is before it actually is in its proper full release state, and that was the problem with Hades 1, if I recall correctly also. And we're still in this weird situation where you're playing as what looks like a completely different character versus the character in Hades 1. WayForward is reimagining the original Contra game for modern systems. This is a Video Games Chronicle article. Now, I would have to assume that in the original Contra you just had two male characters, and that they've expanded this to have some gun blasting 90s era animation female characters, and I imagine the original Contra may very well have just been a Rambo and Arnold Schwarzenegger ripoff, and now they've made this guy look a little bit more Asian, adding more diversity overall. Of course, none of that really matters. The real issue you're going to run into, and this is a Konami game, so who knows how much it would really be supported, although WayForward is kind of known for doing good work, at least on their own games. The real question here is just how much of an audience does Contra really have. Contra was more of an arcade game than anything, played in short bursts or played on consoles that didn't have a lot of competition as a side-scrolling bullet hell shooter. Although I guess it's not a bullet hell shooter because you're the one shooting. It's a side-scrolling shooter with just a lot of bullets that you can shoot. And yeah, at a certain level, the 2D side-scrolling aspect only lets the graphics evolve to a certain extent. But this does look much more reasonable as far as what a game looks like today compared to trying to convince people to play Contra on like an emulator. So, yeah. Contra were released in 1987 and 88 on the NES. Well, no, it was in the arcades in 87 and then on the NES in 88. So, yeah. Noticeably in that trailer, they did not really show the girl characters at all. I imagine they will play almost exactly the same. I don't think the two male characters played any different in Contra. Contra, noticeably, I believe, is the game that first instituted the Konami code that is still a meme today, and was really the only way that you could win on the NES game, is that you entered the Konami code to get more lives, because the game was clearly designed for arcades to eat up quarters, and when you couldn't put in a new quarter into the NES and had a limited number of lives, there was only the Konami code to save you. This one was a bit of an outstander since it was a part of the Nintendo Direct, but it's a licensed anime game. And it is another example also of one that was announced at the Nintendo Direct as if it was going to be a Switch exclusive, but you can clearly see it's actually coming to the PS4 and 5 and PC also. Spy X Anna Operation Memories has been announced for all those consoles. So Anna is this anime girl, moe girl here, or chibi girl almost, who weirdly has psychic powers and was adopted by this guy and this girl because this guy is a spy for one side, and then he's faking a marriage and a family by pretending or getting married to this girl who is a spy, unknowns to him, at least originally, for the other side. So it's two spies who are working against each other and pretending to be a family. And she's psychic as part of the gag there. And so she knows he's a spy, and she knows she's a spy, but she's not telling anybody. And she's fairly beloved in this anime series when it aired a couple seasons ago. I don't know if it's still airing. But I don't think this game has that much to do with the spy versus spy or spy family anime. I forget the name of it actually. It feels much more like this is a spin-off. Let's just do something cutesy with Anna due to her being received particularly well. And really this is just one of those summer memories experiences where it looks like she's doing mini games and she's going to do some photography. They're not even showing photography here. Yeah. And she is really young. You can tell she's basically in kindergarten in this private school, in that they're all wearing the same simplistic outfits here. So your entertainment or interest in this game is going to heavily depend on just how much how much you're into the popular anime and manga series Spy X Family. And this is another case of Bandai Namco using their own content, or Bandai using its own content of anime stuff to promote and sell video game spin-offs. Apparently, according to GameDeveloper.com, the ex-Senate consul Christiana Barnhart has joined the ESA as Government Affairs Senior Vice President. So this is your standard lobbyist group in the Entertainment Software Association, giving a kickback effectively to the US government by hiring somebody who almost certainly had influence on senators and affected the way senators may pass laws or what senators would focus on, which that heavily speaks to the level of corruption in all governments and the US government in particular. And that is effectively what lobbyist groups are, though, is that they are peddling an influence, and one way they can get influence over people in politics is to have a quid pro quo of hiring people who used to work in government to work for the lobbyist group or work in the industry that they saw after the fact. There are a few ways you can try and prevent that. You could say you can't work in that industry after you come out of politics for a few years. You could, politicians are overpaid anyways, you could demand that they not work in any industry at all. But if you demanded they didn't work in any industry, it doesn't mean they still wouldn't potentially get some kind of benefits or kickbacks in some other way. This is definitely an ethical issue, in that it's unethical for a ex-Senate consul to be hired by a lobbyist group, but it's an ethical issue for the ex-Senate consul and the government. It's not so much an ethical issue for a lobbyist group, which is inherently unethical in the first place. It's an organization designed to manipulate the governments, the US government. It's an organization designed to lobby for the profits and corporate interests of the likes of Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo. Yeah. But unfortunately, this happens every day. So, yeah. Usually we don't even get told about it. There are, I suppose, some other ways you could prevent these things from happening, but they would have to be rules and regulations or laws passed by the Senate themselves, and the Senate themselves is not really interested in regulating their own corrupt behavior. The extreme version of this solution is that you would be nominated and voted in as a politician, and then you would be put in cryostasis or shot after you stop being as a politician. That's effectively the only extreme way to stop them getting any benefit or any kickbacks. And even at that wouldn't really work, because while you could make it much more democratic that people get put in positions of power, and that would be nice, people have friends and families that could be given free trips and gifts and rewards. You'd basically need to make senators have mandatory anonymity, and you just don't know who the senators are in the first place. The Lego 2K Drive game Season 2 is out now, but also I think they had laid off some people at Lego 2K Drive, so I don't know if there's really going to be a Season 3. Yeah, I think that's what I was when I had this tab open. The better solution would probably be to replace all politicians with artificial intelligence. Yeah, there's a job that could easily go the way of AI and not that many people would care. Although AI would have a real hard time representing its constituents or its people. We really could get much closer to direct rule, to direct democracy on all laws, all proposals. Swipe left, swipe right if you agree with this petition. We already talked about the Star Wars Jedi series director Stig Asmussen leaving Respawn. And then there's a GameDeveloper.com article here saying Square Enix. There's a report that Square Enix is suffering from mismanagement in the ad hoc development process, and I don't know how much of a rumor that really is, since that's basically the assumption as to how things are being done. And then Netflix has announced an animated showcase to feature numerous video game shows. And then let me just see if any of these other tabs are anything of importance. I had a whole bunch of help things that I was doing while trying to figure out the right way to make the chart. So got a bunch of tabs open trying to teach me the basic functions on top of the overall functions. So here's like the SteamDB most played games chart that I'm potentially going to scrape the information for. And yeah, if I could get the rating here and get that information and get this Metacritic information and get the total number here and the total number here, if I can scrape all of that, that'd be useful information. Release date also might be useful on top of the 24-hour peak. The problem there is that all of these pluses here are hidden. So making a macro to get this information on this pop-up is way more difficult than making a macro to get the all-time peak and the 24-hour peak and the current. Like, I'm not getting the current information. That's useless. I want the 24-hour peak. I'm getting the URLs and the little pictures, but the pictures actually don't show up in the chart anyways, unfortunately. I tried to do it. It's just a seeming limitation of the way charts go, because it would be nice, ideally, and I don't know if there's really a way to do this, to have been able to put the picture at the end of each of these lines. And obviously there will be a lot more lines here. I don't really love this color palette either, but it tries to keep everything diverse. And there should be grid lines here to tell us. With more data, these dots where there's only one point of information would become lines, and we can potentially follow a trend where fewer people play one day versus other days. But yeah, that's probably what I'm going to work on more of. After today's stream, although I should just get back to playing the Blob, and I should play Yu-Gi-Oh! More. So here's the green 20th anniversary link when you link on it, and it goes through when Steam first launched in 2003, which 20 years, and it starts to highlight some of the games that were popular for each year, and it also talks about memes and links to a bunch of things. It says at the beginning that some of the links will lead to you getting a reward. I will spoil and save you a lot of clicks. None of the links in these descriptions actually lead to a reward. The reward is way at the bottom. I clicked on every single link and opened a ton of tabs, and it did not really do anything for me. You can see by 2011 you're having fairly modern, fairly decent games on Steam, and Steam totally took over. And by probably even 2010, 2011, there really should have been, that should have been the point in which other storefronts would have tried to have a competitor coming out. But they just totally dropped the ball even at that point. Honestly, Valve announces Steam as a PC-based store. There should have been a competitor within 2 or 3 years of that, 2005. And I don't know if I can name any other Steam store, any storefront compared to Steam that's been running for 20 years or really trying to compete. You can see some of these games are on sale, but a lot of these games being mentioned are not on sale by the time I'm looking at it. But also, incredibly, what they're showing you are just not Valve games. They're just games in general. Like, it's not really much going on there. Cult of the Lamb was the game that they said they were going to delete it. We have Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I can't help but think that some of these games are being picked randomly to advertise directly to me. But then why advertise games I already own? So way down here at the bottom is the free point shop. And this is definitely advertisements and not good data per se. Like, I would much prefer if I could click on a specific year and then it would have shown me a way to see all the top games released in 2015 instead of just a small amount. Then yeah, I'm still not sure what thing is being blocked here to causes this to crash. And then the Steam store point shop things that they were giving you are just these, all of which are free. Might as well take them, but it's nothing interesting and nothing you'd really ever use. This whole Steam point shop clearly is just designed to put a fresh coat of paint on fairly on the marketplace and move people away from using the marketplace and using real world money that could be cashed out in favor of using points that can't be cashed out. I have like 1,700 Steam points, so I guess if something went on sale, getting different startup movies which should be free, paying 3,000 for each of those is really expensive. And then having any particular love for any specific game would be very expensive, or wanting a specific background or icon. They are effectively just trying to make you pay through the nose for stuff that was once given away for free, and arguably stuff that shouldn't exist in the first place. Yeah, there's absolutely nothing impressive here. A lot of cat animated stickers, which I think are one-time use, where you get a minimal number of uses you can use on there. Anime girl cat mini profile background, and anime girl cat zoomed in more, being a top seller. Chat effects might be the ones that are only usable 2 or 3 times. And just like scrolling down here and just looking at the games I most recently played on, which it's not letting me scroll any further for some reason. Yep, there's nothing here at all that is even slightly interesting. The community awards and seasonal badges might have made sense, but nope. These are some older articles that I missed in the last stream from Video Games Chronicles, so let's go through that fairly quickly. Starfield has driven 2 best sales weeks for Xbox Series X and S in this year for the UK. So yeah, big sales for the hardware. Square Enix lost nearly $2 billion in market value since Final Fantasy XVI's release, which, yeah, that's a lot of money. And then Like a Dragon Studio Ruga Gotoku is holding a product showcase next week. And then EA has confirmed that The Sims 5 will be free to download. And then the former Marvel and God of War exec has been appointed as Epic Games Chief Creative Officer. Charlie Wynn is replacing the outgoing Donald Mustard, which maybe is a little too inside baseball, but it does potentially lead to a possible shift in how Epic Games will be created and what kind of content will be put in Fortnite, which inherently, with a new guy coming in, I hope they put some focus on making other games and not just having everything be Fortnite all the time. So here's Steam as it is now, and yep, it's still the blue background, which honestly I feel like the blue background is getting lighter instead of darker. Maybe they are not pushing for an all black, but instead pushing for an all white. You look at Amazon.com as far as white websites, or Walmart.com as far as white websites, it kind of makes some sense that would be the direction you would go. No, at a certain level, I could use that plugin I installed and change the CSS and just make the website look white now, just to show what it potentially would look like. Although if I was going to start messing with the way Steam looked, I'd probably want to rethink the way it looks in general. In particular, if we can play around a little bit here, let's show what Steam, this is Steam on a widescreen, the widest possible zoom would look like, and it doesn't change much, it just adds this here, at least with my ad blocking enabled. Let's show it what it would look like if you have the biggest zoom in. So like on a mobile phone, you can see it's not very accommodating on a big zoom in, low resolution type screen. And so that would be my target, is more flexible, reactive website design for smaller screens and bigger screens in both directions. And certainly HTML and CSS as it is now, compared to the way I was taught HTML a long time ago, definitely makes for a way to make web pages much more dynamic and flexible. As far as that, I didn't mean to click on Call of Duty here. So that's going to properly get us into Video Games Chronicle news, although a significant amount of this stuff is probably stuff I want to burn through fairly quickly as far as news goes. I hope I fixed the whole banners situation, but I'm not sure I've 100% fixed the whole banners situation. It does still seem like there's a black bar happening under the banner. And honestly, I just don't know if the fonts and the text that I'm showing visually look good enough to justify working that way. It'd be nice if it had more of an artistic polish to it. Anyways, Roblox PlayStation release date has been confirmed. Resident Evil 4's remake of Separate Ways DLC is coming next week. Helldivers 2 has been delayed and will now release next year. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's release date has been confirmed. When is that? February 29th on 2 discs. Foamstar's open beta we talked about. New metallic PS5 controllers and console covers have been revealed, which arguably there is a decent reason to get that. Having a metal controller for somebody who drops controllers or bangs up the plastic might be very useful. Although in all fairness, there's also a lot of people that throw controllers, so having a heavier metallic controller could also be a big problem. In fact, I assume the weight is different, so even just controlling it and holding it may feel very awkward. Or, you know, metal might get static buildup or it might be colder. I personally would like a hand warmer in controllers. That would be nice if you could do it when it's plugged in. But also you don't want it so hot that you're sweating, so cooling might be helpful with a metal one too. Generally though, controllers in plastic are fine. Like, I drop my controller all the time and that's not really what breaks it. And when I knock it off the edge of my chair, what breaks it is just wearing out the analog sticks. And I don't throw controllers ever, because why would I? I don't know why people do that anyways. They're not in control of their own actions, it seems. Which that's certainly a scary thought for people who are in control of their actions at all time. But yeah, I don't throw controllers, so I wouldn't break a controller by throwing it, nor would I want people throwing metal controllers to break walls or TVs. Let's see. We already talked about that, or ignored that more accurately. Spider-Man 2 trailer reveals an open world gameplay is in an expanded New York setting, which I guess maybe this is the first time they've actually said that Spider-Man 2 was in open world, or had open world gameplay, but it was fairly assumed that that was the case. It would be very weird if Spider-Man 2 had a very linear, non-open world experience when the first game had open world experience and was praised for being able to swing around all of New York. Of course, you can't expand New York by that much. At a certain point, if you're getting up to 150th Street, or you're going to the Southamptons or Jersey or something like that, once you start getting off of Manhattan Island or to north of Manhattan Island, it's not the New York City people think of when you say New York City. See, a new story trailer for Avatar Pioneers of Pandora has been released, if you want to check that out at Video Games Chronicles. Then creative director revealed what game was ending. Supergiant has revealed Hades 2 early access and technical test plans. Baldur's Gate 3's next major patch we talked about. Wizardry we talked about. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a PlayStation 5 exclusive for at least 3 months, which you would assume that was the case. Mortal Kombat 1 has received a day 1 patch. The game is now playable for early access customers. Now, noticeably, I have not heard anybody say anything about Mortal Kombat 1. So, it'll be interesting to see if anybody is saying anything about it by Monday. Both Another Code games are being released on the Switch. Then we talked about Princess Peach Showtime, and Tomb Raider, and F-Zero 99, and Paper Mario. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Wave 6 DLC has been revealed, which I thought they said they weren't going to make any more DLC. Yeah, this is the 6th and final wave of DLC. Okay. So this is the last bit of DLC. The final Smash Bros. Amiibo, Kingdom Hearts Sora, is coming next year. Sora was the last character added to Smash Bros. Ultimate, and I suspect that also indicates that Amiibos might not be supported for the Switch 2, which honestly make a heck of a lot of sense to get rid of Amiibo support. It just never made sense. And particularly after COVID and shortages, having little toys with QR codes, or not QR codes, but NFC tags built into the base is crazy. Toys to Life as a concept is long since dead, and that hopefully it never comes back, but there's a small chance it would come back. The next free Epic Game Store titles have been confirmed. Out of Line and the Forest Quartet will replace 911 Operator, which is now free to claim. And then we talked about F-Zero artists thanking Nintendo. Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty gets a new cinematic trailer and an Idris Elba video. Is Idris Elba one of the guys that died like in the past year? I don't think so. I guess he's probably still alive. Yeah, so many celebrities who did bit parts or cameos, I guess you'd call them cameos, in video games have died in the past year or so. Apparently there is a PlayStation State of Play live stream happening either right now or soon. Yeah. So yeah, I imagine a lot of what the State of Play is going to be, though, is going to be re-announcing or talking about games that were just announced at the Nintendo presentation. It's kind of weird to have a Nintendo Direct and a State of Play both either right at the beginning of Tokyo Game Show, which maybe that they're directly connected to Tokyo Game Show, or they're doing it right before Tokyo Game Show, as if they expect a lot more announcements or no announcements around Tokyo Game Show. Talked about the Nintendo Museum. We talked about Ubisoft London, formerly known as Future Games of London, being shut down. Apparently it was a mobile studio, so it was mostly making mobile games. Hungry Shark series. Don't even know what that is. Then we talked about Contra and Immortals of Avium, developer laying off nearly half its staff. And then we talked about the Game Boy Advance title Mario vs. Donkey Kong being remade for the Switch. I think I did play Mario vs. Donkey Kong for a brief time. I don't think I played it all the way through. And I could see myself not really playing it all the way through. It definitely looks like it would take a lot of investment for a game that I probably wouldn't be that interested in actually playing. And then that brings us to the Gematsu articles, which we probably talked about a bunch of these. Let's see, Romance of the Three Kingdoms 8 remake for the PS4 and 5 and Switch and PC, which I would like to know which Romance of the Four Kingdoms that would be, or what they're up to now, or if this is even all one same series, because let's be honest, there's just a lot of Chinese based games that are based on the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. This definitely looks like it's a strategy / visual novel game. It's not really what I was thinking it would be. We talked about Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3 Remastered being announced for all consoles and PC. So we don't really have to do anything more there. Although I could have just opened the tab there. Detective Pikachu Returns has its Nintendo Direct trailer if you want to check that out on Gematsu. Now I almost wonder if this wasn't shown on the English Nintendo Direct, but it must have been because they have an English trailer here. But I don't remember it. They also announced Trombone Champ, which is a trombone rhythm game, and I feel like there was one on the Wii. There was something like that, or yeah, I think it was the Wii, not the Wii U. Kind of a ridiculous rhythm game. Which, yeah, again, I suspect that game is probably being shoveled out because either the next Nintendo console is not going to be backward compatible, or they've got an incredibly strong lineup of games that they want to launch with the next console. Potentially, that might indicate that the next console has some kind of VR mandatory element or other gimmick mandatory element that just makes a traditional Switch game incompatible with the next Nintendo console. The open world RPG War Tales is now available on the Switch. It was previously released on PC. If these screenshots want to load, show what it looks like. See, it's very positive. It is a strategy placement game though. Yeah, I just don't think a turn-based strategy game is ever going to make it for me. So I'm going to take it off the follow list. I just have to be true to myself and know that I just don't have the time or interest in turn-based strategy games of any type. If Disgaea didn't convince me to play a strategy turn-based game, then I don't think anything would. A game called Battle Crush has a closed beta test for October 23rd to the 30th. Which, okay. I guess that means I need to make a YouTube short around that and put it on the follow list, even though it's not. It's a multiplayer game. Silent Hope's demo is now available. You can carry over your save data to the full game when it launches. This is assumedly a visual novel. No, it's an action RPG hack and slash game. And these screenshots look very different from the animated cutscene screenshots. Well, again, I guess I'll make a short on it and put it on the follow list. Not particularly interested. Let's see how many of these end up with us making YouTube shorts, which I desperately need to schedule some YouTube shorts because I've got too much of a backlog. Atlas and Vanillaware announced a tactical RPG called Unicorn Overlord for the PS4, PS5, Switch, and Xbox Series. Noticeably, they are skipping the PC on this one. This definitely has more of that Square Enix Final Fantasy feel to it. Not Final Fantasy though. From the Square Enix, from the maker of the original Final Fantasy games. Feel. We talked about Luigi's Mansion 2 HD launching in summer. We talked about F-Zero 99. Bandle Tale, a League of Legends story has been announced for Switch and PC, which they were trying to make a whole bunch of League of Legends games, and definitely was a case where they announced that they had several games in development, and people were saying that that was way too many games to announce, and it definitely was, and now we're slowly getting one or two every now and then. The fitness boxing featuring Hatsune Miku called Ishoni Exercise launches March 7th in Japan. It is questionable whether this will make it to the West, in part because maybe parents won't appreciate Hatsune Miku showing her whole belly in a fitness boxing outfit, and in part because Hatsune Miku in general is just not that popular of a character, whereas fitness boxing in Switch is going to feel like it's for kids. And yeah, you definitely have to be a niche fan of Hatsune Miku as an adult to want to buy this game, and I'm not sure there's enough of those niche fandoms in the West to justify shipping it out. MarioWare Move It, Nintendo Direct screenshots and trailers available. Again, this is a game I just don't remember saying. I wasn't paying that much attention, which that is definitely part of the problem of watching any of these events, is that they go too long and I just don't pay that much attention. Anyways, you get much better information from Gamatsu later on. Noticeably, one of these mini games seems to be playing just a level out of Super Mario Bros. 3. Okay. EU Den Chronicle 100 Heroes launches April 23rd. This is for basically everything. Another RPG, fantasy RPG type game. Make a short on that. I probably should use the phrase clip. Even though they're called YouTube shorts, just say, let's make a clip from that, let's clip that. Eastward Octopia expansion has been announced. It's due out this holiday for Switch and PC. This is the first I've heard of this game, and it says PC, so I don't know if that's maybe Epic Game Store or its own launcher. Now, looks like a Stardew Valley game of some sort. Hope it is. On Steam, and actually came out in 2001. So this DLC is the thing to see if I could make a clip from that, since it does have a Steam page. This probably will work. Wargroove 2 launches October 5th. Which, okay. I don't know anything about Wargroove. Looks a little too zoomed out for my taste, I would say, but definitely, basically anything that advertised deserves a clip. Dave the Diver for Switch launches October 26th. It'd be interesting in this case to just figure out what the peak number of people today was. All-time peak was 98,480, whereas the peak today is 6,349, so fairly small number, which is not super surprising. And once the initial launch week, once that initial hype is gone, it would be fairly unlikely for single player games to get big boosts. Star Ocean, the second story art demo is now available. Latest details, trailer, and screenshots are available if you want to check it out on Gamatsu. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass Wave 6 launches this holiday. It's interesting, she's just like flying out of the cart. Which, does that imply they're not wearing seatbelts? And does that get Nintendo in trouble? Onion Games has announced Fairy Tale RPG Stray Children for the Switch. Doesn't seem like it's coming out for anything else. They're comparing it to things like Cholip, Little King's Story, Rule of Rose, Mario Party RPG, and of course Moon. And I only know Mario RPG and Moon. I don't know any of these others. There might be a game called Rule of Rose, but I'm not sure if it's the game I'm thinking of. If I was to just look at these screenshots, let's say that this looks like it's kind of a Earthbound looking game, and Moon, I believe, was the name of Earthbound's originally. So that's what they're referencing here. Yeah. I'm gonna run out of steam here if I don't hurry up. Among Us map The Fungal launches in October according to Komatsu. Shiren the Wanderer 6 Toguru Island Expedition Record has been announced for Switch. I assume this was possibly on the Japanese Direct and not on the American Direct. Seems like it's a game where you wander and do turn-based combat. And that's about all I could really say about it. Paper Mario Thousand Year Door was announced. The game Baby Steps launches in the summer of 2024. Which, yep. This is a game that's getting a lot of advertisement for what is effectively a joke troll game. But I guess Devolver Digital is using Benet Foddy, and so that name may sell it more. Roblox for the PS4 and PS5 launches October 10th. A game called Ghostbusters Rise of the Ghost Lord launches October 26th, which this one is a bit of a shock. It's set in San Francisco, PC, PSVR 2, PS5, and Quest. I suspect it's all VR though. If there's a non-VR version of it, I'd be surprised. Yeah, Gematsu labels things PC when the VR is PC. Now this may be the second or third time we've had a Ghostbusters VR game. In general, being a Ghostbusters in VR is not a terrible idea. Definitely looks like they're going in some wilder visual directions and trying to make a new generation of new technology and of new Ghostbusters, which is something I imagine they can experiment with more in VR instead of trying to bring back the original Ghostbusters actors from the original movies. That being said, I don't really feel like these Ghostbuster characters are based off the most recent Ghostbusters movie with the kids. Aftermath, I believe, was the name of that. And you would think that if they were going to make a new Ghostbusters game, you might very well try and integrate the kids, because that seemed to work fairly well. But I'm not 100% sure on that. This might actually be the kids, just older, since I didn't actually watch Aftermath. I could probably look and see if it was streaming. I wouldn't mind sitting through it at this point. I mean, I've seen the one before Aftermath, and so it would only make sense to watch Aftermath too. Let's see. Resident Evil 4 DLC we talked about. Ghost Runner 2 demos available. Avatar Frontiers of Pandora story trailer. I assume in the Avatar movies all of the blue creatures are covered up, but this definitely feels like this is a rather large amount of adornment and clothing for an Avatar character. And I thought they were in the ocean most of the time swimming. Speaking movie series I've never seen any of the Avatar movies. But yeah, I generally was expecting that all the Avatar characters were mostly the naked animals like that. Yeah, definitely feels like I would have to have watched the movies to really have much of a relationship to any of these Avatar games. Otherwise, this really does just feel like it's a spin on making a Far Cry style game. Helldivers 2 delayed to February 8th. I think we said that a couple times. The Marvel Spider-Man's 2 Expanded Marvel New York and Digital Deluxe Edition trailers, which I don't really feel like you need any more advertisement here. I would like to know which version of Spider-Man this is, but I don't really care that much. Yeah. Eventually I'll play Spider-Man on Steam. Spider-Man 1. Then eventually I'll play Spider-Man 2. It's not even really a question. A Tale of Arise expansion called Beyond the Dawn has been announced, due out November 9th. Which I guess Tales of Arise has already been out. Yep, it's already been out and on the wish list, and I've already forgotten all of it. So again, if I could find the DLC page, if it was already listed on Steam, I would have made a short around that, but I can't, so I won't. Honkai Star Rail for PS5 launches October 11th. It does definitely feel like, though, it's a little too late for some of these bigger, more successful mobile games to try to come through consoles. And that definitely would point out some weirdness if the next Nintendo console really was a VR game console only, or had some other gimmick that just didn't let you put regular games on it. There's just a potential nightmare scenario there where people who develop mobile games would potentially want to port their mobile game to the next Nintendo console and wouldn't be able to. Although at a certain level, if Nintendo comes out with a new console and there's no backward compatibility, then the Nintendo Switch is just going to continue to be sold at that point, and then Nintendo tries to get people to double dip on the console, and that potentially creates a failure for whatever their next console is. Even the small library of Switch games that a kid probably has is too big for people to abandon it for something new. Let's see. Foam Star's open beta party for PS5 is set for September 29th to October 1st. Final Fantasy Rebirth launches February 29th. Final Fantasy VII Remake shipments and digital sales top 7 million. Virtual reality tactical adventure game Soul Covenant has been announced for the PSVR, PC, and Quest 2. The game called Tevi launches November 30th for the Switch and PC. In 2024, it will launch for the PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Series. Let's see what Tevi looks like. It's a Metroidvania game with the bunny-eared anime girl. Chibi anime girl. I've already made a clip from it. Picross S Plus was announced for the Switch. We kind of had already talked about that. Livewire announces a roguelike action game called Ninth Sentinel Sisters for PC, due out first in early access. Okay. There's probably not too much there in that game, but I'll make a clip anyways. Tintin Reporters Cigars of the Pharaoh launches November 7th for the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox One and Series and PC. Then it's being delayed to 2024 for the Switch, which I suppose the more instances of we see of Switch games being delayed to 2024 might breathe some last breaths of life into the Switch. Tintin is incredibly popular basically everywhere outside of the United States and completely unknown inside the United States, to the point where I really don't know his personality. He's like a news reporter with a dog and goes on adventures. I think he was based off of a comic book or a comic strip, possibly a comic strip. Genshin Impact 4.1 update to the stars shining in the depths launches September 27th. Not to be confused with Honkai Rail, another mobile game. And then Wizardry, already had that. Tab open. And that brings us to GameDeveloper.com articles, which we'll probably burn through all of these very quickly, since we've talked about all of these stories already. Yeah. The only story I didn't talk about was Ubisoft Montreal is in disarray after a forced return to office mandate. After years of working remotely, being told to return to the office has put the staff of Ubisoft Montreal in a number of tight spots. And then that brings us to the fall list cleanup in the auto blur, which the fall list actually did work today. Kingdom of the Dead rated very positively. Hand-drawn horror. I really have to question what I'm doing here. Like, my instinct is to say no to this game, but everything tells me to say yes to this game. It's got over 30 reviews. It's rated very positively. By my metric, I should put it on the wish list. So I just need to stay consistent and put it on the wish list. Now, inherently, when I do something like that, I didn't always mention that there's a high chance it will just be on my wish list forever until I decide to clean up my wish list anyways, and I would never actually buy it, which I bought considerably few video games this year. Kingdom Gun is mixed reviewed, so it can leave the follow list. Kingdom 80s is mostly positive, so it can go to the wish list. Kingdom Builders is mixed reviewed, so it can leave. King Arthur Knight's Tale again goes to the wish list, but I may not ever buy it. Kindred Fates Combat Arena Alpha, it's from 2001 and has only 5 user reviews. This was a game where they were effectively ripping off Pokemon characters, but they made no progress on it in ripping off a Pokemon game. Killing Floor 3 is just coming soon. Here we have a game called Killer Ricky, which is mixed, so it can leave. Next we have Killer Frequency, which is a first-person horror puzzle game. It's overwhelmingly positive, so we'll put it on the wish list. When is the last time I even looked at the wish list, though? Well, in all fairness, the November Black Friday sales will probably happen. There will be a fall sale around Steam, and I probably would look there, although maybe I won't even bother with that. And we have something called Cyber Control, which is mixed, so it can leave. So that was a fairly quick fall list cleanup, which just then is going to bring us to all the new games released on Steam. I haven't seen anybody on chat this week, which is crazy because I feel like I got the chat decorum set up fairly nice, and I just don't feel like that's influencing the chat much. Oh, it's probably worth mentioning too, when my channel got inaccurately flagged and deleted and then undeleted by YouTube, it canceled all the premieres that I had scheduled. So every episode 1 for every series that I had uploaded and scheduled got canceled. And it took me several weeks to realize that's what happened. So fortunately going forward that won't be a problem, but things like No More Heroes episode 1 came out technically after No More Heroes 2 came out, and I hope that doesn't create any long-lasting problems as far as making playlists. I don't know if playlists really matter that much, or if there's anything that I could really do to fix it. So the very first game we have on this Friday is called Maid Slaves and Golden Dragon, and is an adult game. It's an RPG Maker looking game. To the colorful palette, I would say maybe not so much. The lady who's being shown here is shown more as a older maid character in the 2D visual novel aspects, and then barely looks anything like a character at all in the RPG Maker pixel 8-bit pixel concept. It is just a JRPG, which we don't see a lot of those in the adult section. For $5.59, it says it supports English, Japanese, and Chinese. Yeah, and I just don't... I would expect to see a lot more games like this. But weirdly, I don't see a lot more games like this. Instead, you see censored versions of these games outside of the adult section. So this might be an indication that we are going to start to see more of those types of games in the adult section, which is where they belong, if they belong on Steam in the first place, which is perhaps more of a matter of curation and opinion. Elon versus AI we can say no to. Insurgency Runner doesn't look like anything. Inspector Gadget, Mad Party Time, finally out. See if the 2 reviews say anything interesting. 2 positive reviews so far, which doesn't mean anything really. This is a game that is not getting anywhere as much advertisement as it probably should. Not that Inspector Gadget is particularly relevant, or relevant at all. It should be advertised as a throwback, though, and it should have gotten some more press releases, just cheap paper announcements. And if there is like a new cartoon around Inspector Gadget, I have not heard anything about it. Let's see. Next we have a game called Inhibit. I'd already made a YouTube short on the Inspector Gadget game, so I'm not going to make a new clip for it. Nothing interesting in Inhibit. Compass of Destiny Istanbul doesn't look like anything. Bouncing Trails. It is very possible we won't see much on this Friday, just because it's Friday, but also because the Tokyo Game Show is the Tokyo Game Show is either happening or about to happen. Brightside Riddles and Puzzles. Well, it's an interesting thought. Riddles in general would have been super popular. Riddles and joke books and things like that would have been super popular when books were the main form of entertainment. Brain teasers and things like that. It's funny that we haven't seen people try to do more either visual riddles or word riddles in video games. Perhaps it's because riddles very often are built around the idea of wordplay, and that doesn't translate well to video. But even in basic games, you tend not to have brain teasers or puzzles or riddles. Let's see, my audio seems to not always play. I'm still trying to find a song that doesn't have a lull in the sound. This Silent Seeker doesn't look like anything. Whoops, I didn't show it. Well, it was garbage anyways. Here we have another game, another Backrooms game. Just asset flip garbage. Body Bite Land Overclocked is now out, and we can see it's mostly positive. Now it does create a problem if a game is on my follow list, meaning I've already made a short around it, then it gets released and then it has over 30 positive reviews, because then I would just put it on the wish list and take it off the follow list and then potentially advertise it a second time, but probably not, because by the time something's released it's not going to put out a new press release around the game. So there really isn't a problem there. I just thought for a second there would be. Farmcraft looks a little bit too much like a mobile game, but I'll give it a chance. Dreams of Geisha sounds like a game that would be an adult game, but doesn't look like it is. It really looks like it's just a match game. So I'll make a short on it. Although in this case I don't think I need to actually put it on the follow list anyways, because I would not actually buy it. Simple Snooker, which requires you to know snooker and the game to be actually good, which I don't think anything with simple in the name has a high chance of being good, so no to that. Here we have an RPG 2D game called Clanswoman, which almost certainly is the same idea as the adult game, just with the adult section content missing. Never there in the first place. Although noticeably, in this case, there is no screenshot here where this character is talking to you in a larger form, so you're only really seeing these 8-bit characters. Yeah, the best you get are little headshots down here. We are probably primed to see a larger number of RPG Maker games in the next few years because of this whole Unity situation. You'll just see people moving over, scammers and low effort game developers moving over from Unity asset flipping to RPG Maker asset flipping, and that's pretty much all these RPG games really are, is just asset flipping to make a very generic, boring RPG game. Gold Rush Clicker looks like it's just a clicker game, and it doesn't look that polished or interesting even at that. Kokoro looks like it's some kind of Sudoku-like puzzle. I don't even know how you play Kokoro, but I would say the game interface is severely lacking, so I'm going to say no to it for that reason. Bellis Battle looks like it's a player versus player game. Looks like it's just all over the place. Not quite polished enough, and no online content either, so it's split screen player versus player. I'm going to say no to that. Circular Logic Games seems to be a collection of mini games. I'm going to put this on the follow list just to see if people like it, but I'm not going to make a clip on it. No Sun to Worship looks like a horror game with just barely enough polish to say to give it a chance. If I had just seen the areas and hadn't seen the enemies, hadn't seen the players, I would have said no. Wizardry Proving Ground of the Mad Overlord is on Steam, so that's basically the big release today. And then we have another adult game called Bancroft Academy, which is 3D CGI characters with a bunch of random background settings, it looks like. I assume this is a case where this is a like Harry Potter clone ripoff, except for unlike Harry Potter, all the characters, 3D CGI models, are in their 30s and 40s. I'd say though, of all these screenshots, they're actually YouTube family friendly. Let me just reevaluate that and think that for a second. We'll just shut. It's always good to give a general example of how these adult games are cheap. It's just a visual novel, and even though it's 3D CGI, that doesn't mean there's actually any movement in it. But yeah, you start with just being shown several ladies, and then there's a guy, and then you've got this kind of architectural background, and then you've got a magical book like the Sorting Hat, and then hugging, and then more of this background. Basically, these 3D CGI models are just being put in front of a background. It could be any background, and then she's doing some kind of magic, and then it's showing another background, and then the book, and then another background, and then the book. So yeah, clearly trying to be inspired by Harry Potter. It's selling for $2.99, English only. None of the screenshots doing a good job of telling you what kind of like adult scenes are in it, assuming there are adult scenes in it, which yeah, I have to actually question if there are adult scenes in it. Let me scroll back up and see what the mature content says. It seems like it's a very vanilla visual novel. It does have adult scenes in it, but it says they're all consensual, and that's basically it. Which, yeah, if you're gonna go magic, if you're gonna go Harry Potter, you probably want to integrate those themes in one way or another into the adult content also. Lorryville 5 is a match 3 game. And I'm gonna say no to making a clip on that, which maybe means I should have said no to making a match 3 clip, a clip based on a match 3 game in the past. This Plasmatic looks like it might be an interesting puzzle game, light puzzle style game. I don't know if it really would be described as a light puzzle game. Jet Up is seemingly taking the idea of making a clone of Only Up and adding a jet, which either makes the game super easy, or you have a limited amount of fuel and can only jet for so far, which might make the game fairly hard. There is a bar of something here, which might be an indication of the health or fuel. Regardless, looking at the screenshots, you can pretty well tell it's all just asset flip garbage. Next we have another card game called Rogue Cards, which I'm always willing to give a card game a chance, but I'm almost always disappointed too. Sniper Hunter Shooter. I would say the name is too simplistic, but of the 3 or 4 screenshots here, there might actually be something to this, so I'm gonna be generous and give it a clip. We may be burning through these fairly quickly. Give that a chance as a puzzle game. Silent Paws Hidden Valley we'll say no to, because it's just another one of these games where your asset flips CGI forest and you're playing as an animal. Golf vs. Zombies is a joke game, but there might be some entertainment value in the joke, so I'll give that a chance. It's a interesting name, to say the least. Whereas Post Haste apparently is a racing game which is not an interesting name, nor an interesting visuals. Charles Haunted Mansion. It's too cartoony looking for its own good, so nope to that. Volt Age Genesis is an RPG maker game of no interest. Pop Off 2 looks like it's a I suppose it's a rocket game. You're shooting yourself up as a soda up. No, it's really just an Only Up clone, isn't it? So no to that. Here we have a game called Banter, which looks a lot like this. Thumbnail looks a lot like another game from a long time ago that I tried to cover, and it got DMCA'd, the music did. And at the time it wasn't as easy to remove audio from videos, and so it was getting blocked. There's some website that, some TV series or something that uses Banter as a replacement word for Twitter as a joke. But yeah, apparently this is some kind of VR thing, and I can't even tell really what it is. But it definitely doesn't look like anything of interest. And this looks like this is a Spanish only. Yeah. Troll, maybe political game. Combat Mexico Excellentes. Yeah. It feels like this is probably racist. But yeah, regardless, it doesn't look like a good game, so you don't even have to investigate further. Paranormal VHS, same problem. Dark screenshot syndrome, can barely see anything at all, so that's going to be a no. Next we have Super Brawl Rush, which looks like it might be 2 or 3 different types of games. Seems like you probably dash to attack, if I was to guess. Boss Rush beat 'em up set in the scorched bed of a post-apocalypse, which in all fairness, there aren't as many of those games as you would think there would be as far as Mad Max type clones. But a beat 'em up with such small pixely characters is a little crazy, and the game itself just looks way too zoomed out, nor does it look like there's much variety in the backgrounds or the environments, so I'm gonna say no to that. Looks like we've got what looks like a very cheap point and click puzzle game here we can say no to. Next we have a dark fantasy RPG called Whitestone. Give that a chance. NASCAR Arcade Rush. See, I have this slight thought here. We'll give this a chance too. I could pull of the music I've now picked to make YouTube shorts from. I could pull that up instead of just having Yu-Gi-Oh's music play in the background over and over again and have it swap over. But if I was to do that, then I would be back to the problem of not having audio play that sounds different when the video's blurred. And I'm actually using that audio as a way of seeing if the blur is on or not without having to look to the left on my third monitor. Which, yeah, that will certainly save my neck from getting twisted and sore. We have an adult game here that's called Idol vs. Furries, which it weirdly has a more realistic color palette for one of the 3D CG characters, but then sometimes it has some lighting effects on it that really makes it feel more like a colorful anime style, and the other characters that it's showing definitely are more colorful anime style. The background is fairly detailed in a 3D almost open world first person or third person shooter, I guess is what you'd call it, but it probably is a small play field if I was to guess, and then the furry characters are ridiculous jokes. This is selling for 99 cents. Does this even have adult content in it? No, I guess I just assumed it did. Yeah, I see this style of model and then immediately just assume adult game. And that's a bad testament to the saturation, where if you were going to the Unreal or the Unity asset store and trying to use this model, it would have been used in so many other games that it wouldn't seem unique at all. Of course, somebody making a low effort game like Idle versus Furries doesn't care about that. Next we have an actual adult game called Furries Shades of Gay 3, Still Gayer, which, yeah, seems like we get another one of these every 3 or 4 weeks, which is spreading it out enough as far as the release schedules. It's anthropomorphic animals, not really furries at all. It's actual animal 2D depictions of actual animals that just happen to be standing on 2 legs and have humanoid features. Nobody is in a suit, which inherently a furry is a human in a suit. Looks like there's a match 3 gameplay mechanic. Otherwise it's just a guy on guy gay game with all the guys being animals. It's selling for $8.49. It says it has English full audio, but I would question that. I severely question if there's actually any true demand for these types of games, or if this isn't just somebody trolling and putting a lot of effort into trolling. It definitely may also be a case that these games sell as trolling. Looking at the last Furry Shades of Gay, a shade gayer, Furry Shades of Gay 2, a shade gayer, that was released December 9th in 2021, so it's been actually a couple years. I must be thinking of something else that has released recently, and it is overwhelmingly positive with 568 reviews. For an adult game, that's a massive amount of reviews. 97% positive reviews. So it's a niche audience, but there definitely is an audience there for the second game. It does say in the second game they have voiced sex scenes in the match 3 gameplay mechanic. I would say it is weird though that furries are perhaps the best catered to niche audience on Steam. I think I could probably pick some other audiences they could be better catered to and would sell more copies, whether in the adult section or just in the outside of the adult section. This Aplo VR collection, not really seeing enough here that want to say yes to it. I'll tell you what, I'll put this on the follow list and I'll see what people say. And at some point when the fall sale happens, I probably should go down my wish list and fall list and just add any game that is free to the library. And that will do a decent effort, I think, to clean up both the fall list and the wish list. Regardless, though, I'm not going to make it short on that game. Hexa Wars. Doesn't look like anything, and we're almost done. So, it has been a fairly light week for adult content this week, but we'll see what happens next week. It's been decently balanced, though. Puzzle Valley, I'm gonna again put on the fall list, but not make a clip from. And then Surface Project Dawn. I guess I'll make a clip from that. Then the last game we have for today is called Fear the Spotlight. Which again, I'm going to be generous and give a follow, but I'll make a clip from. Okay, so I think for the most part, I've fixed the banner switching element. Unless we come over here and there's a banner showing, which it isn't, so I figured that part out. But yeah, I need to play more Yu-Gi-Oh! I want to work on that chart some more. I need to play the blob. Hopefully I can get all of that done. I'm still working on finishing up the last few days of Destiny Child, my favorite mobile game that's shutting down, and replacing it with a different game. So yeah, it'll probably be a fairly busy weekend if I can maintain any progress and actually be busy. That's going to be it for this stream though. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's a link in the description box. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.